There are two sides to every story. The National Broadcasting Company presents the vivid drama of life itself. Broadcasting's original program of Mediation, the Court of Human Relations. And now, the man who has familiarized millions of people with the idea of mediation helped to make it a creative force in American life. A.L. Alexander.
It's been said that partnership is the mother of discord. And it's just because people do have differences and are not always able to agree on just what is right and fair in a given situation that mediation is often necessary. We recall the story of the mariner tossed for many days in murky weather and on an unknown sea, who pauses in the midst of the storm to take his latitude and ascertain how far the elements have driven him from his true course. Now we turn to the distinguished latitudinarians to get some objective judgment here. They are unopinionated, or at least at this particular point, unwedded to any opinion, eager to cut through all other considerations to the basic issue. Miss Fannie Hurst, Dr. Ralph Emerson Davis, Dr. Robert J. McCracken. Now here is one of those situations which lends itself ideally to mediation and which we are confident can be adjusted. Are you the complainant in this matter?
Yes.
Will you tell your story?
Mr. Alexander, members of the board, can you tell me just what a marriage is supposed to be? I am married to a man who in many respects is a wonderful person. He doesn't drink. He doesn't go out with other women. Everybody likes him. But somehow or other, somewhere along the line over the period of our marriage, we seem to have drifted apart, to have lost the ability to communicate with each other. Somewhere, something is missing in our marriage, and I don't seem to be able to talk it over.
And what feeling
husband.
do you have?
Well, I thought that impartial persons might help me to make clear to him what I feel is basic in any marriage and what I'm sure you will understand.
Now, what is your idea of marriage?
When I was married, I thought that I'd found a man who would share my interests, be a companion, someone who would share my life. And in the beginning, I thought that was what I had. But as time went on, this drifting apart began. And I just don't seem to be able to talk to him.
Well, now, what was this man when you met him?
Well, he was a bachelor when I met him, and I think he continues to cling to the habits and the ways of a bachelor.
For example?
I love to talk, and he doesn't talk to me. He never brings anyone home to our house, and I love company, and I love people. He never wants to go out to visit friends unless it's something that I specifically arrange.
Well, you say that you can't communicate with him.
No, I can't. And it just doesn't get any better.
Can you discuss things with him? What happens when there's a problem to be settled and you want to discuss it with him?
Well, aside from the most superficial pleasantries, I don't seem to be able to discuss anything with him. As far as problems are concerned, he takes the easy way out. He just wants to let things ride and just let everything go and not bring anything to a head.
And frankly, do you feel that this has come to a kind of dead end?
Yes, I do.
And you want it settled?
Yes. I want to know, is the future going to be a repetition of the past?
Well, suppose we hear from the respondent husband.
Well, Mr. Alexander, as far as I'm concerned, the matter is very simple. I got married for companionship and to have a happy home life. I'm a simple man. I have simple tastes, and I've never pretended to have anything else.
Well, your wife says that you don't like to converse.
Conversation, yes, I do like to converse. But what I object to is the yakety-yak that passes for small talk.
Well, don't you like to have company?
Yes, I do, very much. But, of course, there again, it all depends on who comes. You get more and more of this yakety-yak, which is very, very boring at times.
Well, we can understand that. But outside of the question of small talk, what about the question of settling issues that come up in life?
I'm all for settling issues, and I think they should be settled. But what I like to do is to talk the issue over, settle it, and then put it aside. I don't like to stew and fret about it for hours on end and keep it up indefinitely. I believe an issue should be settled, put aside, and then our thoughts turn to more pleasant things.
Sort of resign yourself?
In a way, yes. Settle it, get it over with.
How do you feel about that?
I don't think that life is as simple as that. I think that life has problems and that you must face up to them. And I like to really thrash a thing out and clear the atmosphere, but not as a crisis, all along the line. And small talk I like. Small talk is what?
Well, do you feel that your personality can be changed, that you can radically change your personality?
Well, I don't suppose so. That's a pretty hard thing to do.
And that seems to be the basis of this issue. Can you give us an example of something that's happened lately of a specific nature to indicate just what the nature of this conflict is?
Well, yes, we have one problem that has had my wife upset for quite some time, and I'd very much like to see it brought to a head. We have a piece of property in the suburbs which we've rented, and recently the tenant wanted to get out ahead of the time his lease was up. My wife wanted to hold him to the lease, and I talked to her and told her I thought that we were foolish to try and do that. By the time we got through all of the hectic problems that it involved and all the trouble, it just wasn't worthwhile. So she was busy at the time, and I went down and settled the issue. I let the tenant out.
Well, the tenant told you that, what did he tell you? I mean, what was the excuse for...
Well, he wanted, they were going to buy a house.
Wanted some property of his own and didn't want to remain in your house, and you just said that he could go, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And did they go?
Yes, they did.
Well, was that the end of the matter?
No, I've had it thrown in my face ever since. Now, that's a matter that is settled. I settled it according to my best judgment, but it keeps coming up time and again, and I never hear the end of it. I think when a matter gets beyond a certain point, it should be dropped and forgotten.
He's right. He hasn't heard the end of it. I haven't been able to reconcile myself to what he did because what is a contract for if it's not to be honored? I was brought up to believe that a contract is a sacred obligation. When I enter into a contract, I expect to honor it. I expect other people to do the same. My husband personally would be very scrupulous about honoring a contract. Yet here is not only one tenant, but two tenants that he lets releases from their obligation to us with no putting up no fight whatsoever. And I think it goes beyond the immediate issue of the substantial loss of money that we took with those tenants. It's an attitude toward life. Do you let everything, do you resign yourself and in a sense become a pawn of fate?
Well, just so that we can understand what happened in this particular issue, did you caution your husband when he left the house about what to do?
When he left, these tenants were getting out 6 months on
Well,
and they both
let's
had leases.
avoid the complications. What happened when he
I
left the
said
house?
when he left the house to go to see our lawyer, I said, don't budge. We have every legal right, every moral right on our side.
And despite that, he let them move.
Despite that, he let them off. So we paid 3 ways. We paid a lawyer to have the leases drawn up in the first place. We paid a lawyer to represent us with our tenants, and then we paid him to let the tenants go off without paying us.
Well, I don't know what kind of a lawyer you had, but didn't you go to the lawyer and...
When I found what the turn of events was, I was astonished, so I immediately communicated with the lawyer to see if there was anything that I could salvage from it. And he said, no, there was nothing, because my husband had volunteered to release the tenants.
And there was nothing further you...
No, and now that's the point. My husband now thinks that he settled the matter according to what he thought was right. It's been done, it's over and done with, and that's the end of it. He doesn't want to discuss it anymore.
And it goes without saying that this has been extremely galling to you and has really brought to a head the controversy between you. Why didn't you want to talk about it?
Well, I did talk about it, and I was willing to talk about it the first 8 or 10 times, but after that, I couldn't see any point in going over it and over it again. There's no point in banging your head against a stone wall.
Do you feel, I addressed the complainant wife, that if there's anything to be done, you have to take the initiative?
Yes, I do, and I thought the point of harping on this is to possibly avoid such a wholesale giveaway another time.
What is your idea of, or your view of what your husband does at home? What does he do at home?
Well, he does sedentary things, and alone. He likes to do things alone. And when I say alone, I don't mean not with me, but not necessarily with other people. He likes to take it easy, and he's been teaching himself French. He listens to classical music. He's interested in hi-fi. They're all very laudable things, but all things that you do alone.
Well, I'd very much like to have her do some of these things with me.
And do you feel that there are some things which a woman can do to keep herself?
Yes, outside of children and the home, there are such things as part-time work, civic work, hobbies, things like that.
How about that?
Well, as far as what I do outside the home, I've gone to business since I was 16 years of age, up until just recently. Outside, as far as my church and my community is concerned, I have been most active in both. You don't want me to go into details?
I don't think that's necessary. Well, the question has been raised about children. We understand that you didn't have any children.
No, I have no mother to run to, and no father, and no children, and really no close relatives living nearby, so I just don't have anyone to talk to. As far as children are concerned, you just don't adopt children at our age. And so we have no children. But I have had many, many other interests. I was interested in politics, very lively interest in politics over the years. I've worked for congressmen and senators. Now that's a man's interest. He says he would like me to be interested in his interest.
But do you feel that
I'd
you've
like him
had a great deal of this sort of thing, and you'd like to concentrate on the home? Do you feel these other things are incidental?
They are additional. What I'd like to have is somebody at home that I could talk to, first of all. That would be the thing that would be closest to my heart. Then after that, if I want to dabble in politics or take a job or do something, that's what I have been. I've had those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, just what's the answer to that?
Well, my idea of life and marriage is to keep them as simple and pleasant as possible. There's enough trouble and problems and hurly-burly in the world of earning a living to keep that part separate. Frankly, I'd like to come home to companionship and peace and quiet.
Well, I think we've explored all aspects of this picture. Certainly, we understand the climate here and the atmosphere. Miss Hurst?
Well, this is really a matter that has to be handled with great dignity, because these are dignified people on a pretty fine plane. May I ask how long you've been married?
17 years.
17 years. I want to ask another personal question, which, if you think that it is impertinent instead of pertinent, tell me. Is there much of a difference in your ages?
The same. We're
The
same
same.
age.
Has it ever occurred to you that if your husband feels that the talk is small, that his interests, as you described them, are very fine? He's
yes.
interested in the best
Yes.
aspects of living.
Yes.
Have you ever tried to enter his world to a greater extent than you have in the past, let us say?
Well, I have told him that if he would go to school, go out with other people to learn this French,
Yes,
I would go with
understand
him.
that.
But I'm not going to do it home alone.
Now, here is a man who is a serene man. He has chosen to walk quietly through his life. I wonder if you're going to be able to reform one another at your ages, if I may say so, and considering your temperament. It would seem to me that something has to give. I'm rather inclined to think of the two, that you are probably a little more flexible as you describe yourself, and as you have described your husband. I think you very aptly stated it. I think your husband has lived as a bachelor for a great many years, and the bones have hardened, so to speak. Now, if they had hardened in a negative way, you'd have a problem. Here is a charming gentleman, and I think that his adjustment, I think you said something very significant about him when you said that he would live up to his contract to the letter of the law. But he had a quality in himself, that a compassion, let us call it, whatever it was, that let him give in to these people through an understanding or through a sympathetic something. I think he's splendid. I wish you could find it in your heart to go a little bit more to his side of the road and to invite him over to you. Your problems to the outsider do not seem insoluble. It just seems to me that something has to give, and I do wish both of you would give.
Dr. McCracken, we've heard Ms. Hurst's remarks. Now, here is a wife who wants to expand and a husband who's satisfied to have peace and quiet. Now, there's the issue. And while we understand that there's incompatibility, and we'd like them not to be incompatible, we know that it isn't as simple as that. And lest anyone has any other idea, it was not our feeling that one or a board can disentangle the accumulated complications of a lifetime in a few moments and create compatibility where there is incompatibility. But there is an issue here. These people have set forth their respective positions. One, as I say, wants to expand. The other is satisfied with peace and quiet. Now, what is the answer?
Well, one finds oneself sympathizing in part with both attitudes. A wife who at the end of the day wants chit-chat with her husband. A husband at the end of the day who, after the din and competition of business life, wants quiet. There is incompatibility, but I can't think of it as major, or that it can't be resolved with some give and take. I would want, with respect, to say to the husband that there's a place for chit-chat in life, and that it greases the wheels of life. And to spend some time talking even about the neighbors who may be repainting their home, or about somebody who has bought a car. This has far more significance than appears on the surface. But I would also want to say to the wife that she can't make her husband in her own image, and that where incompatibility exists, one should try to think of complementing and supplementing the fine qualities of each partner to the marriage, merging. And I know such people. Women who are naturally extroverts, men who incline to be the opposite, yet who make wonderful partners, rejoicing in one another's respective qualities and making concessions where concessions should be made. I think the husband has to go out and visit with his wife and be happy to have visitors come in, but there must also surely be times when the wife is content in the silence of her husband. And isn't one of the traditional pictures of marital bliss two people sitting on opposite sides of the fireplace, saying nothing because actually they don't need to say anything? They have achieved the affinity that doesn't call for a great
that
deal.
affinity seems to be lacking.
And I would like,
here.
if I may, to add just one word, that law, of course, has to be respected, but grace is something else again. And while the matter of the property seems to me only to be symptomatic of the total problem, there was an element of grace there that, if it were more universal in life, would make a very great difference to the total happiness of mankind.
Well, thank you, Dr. McCracken. Dr. Davis, I think it might be emphasized, and we'd like your reaction, among other things. Here is a couple that doesn't seem to have any financial trouble to speak of. There are no relatives, and as much as we love relatives, there are times when pressures are brought and there are complications in law situations and so forth, completely lacking here. As much as children are desirable, I think it's recognized that children can be problems and create problems. All of these things are lacking. Now, in view of that, what have you to say?
I heard of a man who, at the end of the week, bought some flowers and took them home to his wife, and when she received them and saw them, she passed out, fainted completely. I mustn't be that facetious, but aren't we reaching for that type of thing? I frequently wonder at the imagination and the earnest effort that a young man who is courting a girl makes in order to make himself acceptable to her, and vice versa. One of the tragedies of all of us is the fact that when we finally become engaged and get married, then we begin taking this whole relationship for granted. And I think that's a mistake. I don't think the marriage relationship takes care of itself. I think we have to continually build it up and strengthen it and enrich it.
Well, Doctor, can you make any more specific comment about this particular situation?
I think the only thing that can be said, Mr. Alexander, is that each of these people must recognize that they're dealing with the most precious thing in life, and in his own way, with imagination. And these people are very competent people. With imagination, they must seek those ways that will reestablish this lost communication. I don't think it's impossible. I think you can begin to do it tonight. I think this wife can come much closer to her husband than she is. I think this husband can move much closer to his wife than he is. And I think gradually, with unselfishness and devotion, that may solve the problem.
Well, certainly, Dr. Davis, we have here a study in incompatibility. In this case, don't you agree, would seem a repudiation, in a sense, of the commonly accepted belief that opposites attract. The question is asked, aren't there many elements present in this relationship that would appear to make it truly worthwhile and worthwhile saving? And this board says unanimously and emphatically there certainly are. Now, we understand and want to have understood, and it should be clearly stated, there are aspects of any relationship that may need highly specialized and personal counseling. And that, of course, never was and is not the intention here. This is a mediation proceeding to endeavor to settle a particular issue or to emphasize certain general principles. There are certain truths or principles at the heart of all existence, the wisdom of experience, that help to free us of confusion. And, sometimes the elemental has a trick of ambushing itself Often what seems complex can be quite simple. To sum up, this board is of the opinion that people are not like two peas in a pod, that individuality can be respected, and what is needed here apparently is a certain largeness of spirit, as Dr. McCracken has emphasized, and a willingness of heart. It's the giving and receiving of that little extra service, the gift beyond the strict obligation. And it's summed up in the words of a little poem I used to read on the air about the urgent need for a basis of friendship between husband and wife, and you may recall that it ends, "We shall be lovers when the last door shuts, but what is better still, we shall be friends." The time has come to extend our thanks to our mediators and bring another session of the Court of Human Relations to a close. May I share with you, during the moment remaining, this covenant or contract for all well-disposed persons. If you were going to give this bargain we're entering into, a contractual arrangement, a name, you'd have to call it, "Let bygones be bygones." I am going your way, so let us go hand in hand. You help me, and I'll help you. We shall not be here forever. One day that kind old nurse will come and rock us all to sleep. Let us help one another while we may.